John Warren, publisher of the San Diego Voice and Viewpoint newspaper, coming to you with our program From the Desk of the Editor. This is a program whereby we share thoughts and information with you, and we invite you in return to tune in, join us, share your questions or your comments. We can be reached at godradio1.com if you come on the internet, or you may call at 858-251-6111. Dr. Leonard Thompson will tell you which social platforms we're operating on. And we are very happy to be here as we merge both our media print and the digital world, because as you know, the Voice and Viewpoint has served San Diego for over 65 years, 67 years to be exact. And we continue to evolve with the times in which we live. And so I want to yield the mic to Dr. Thompson, and then I'm going to come back and share with you that this will be an evening of information. And if you're going to be with us, you might want to grab a pencil and pad because it's going to be a teachable moment in many ways. Thank you.
Well, Dr. Warren, as you can imagine, as always, there's always some glitches right when we get ready to get to the very, very good stuff. We find that we have a few glitches, but we're working out the glitches, but we are live audio-wise, and we're going to continue to keep everything moving forward this evening. And so we are ready, and we're ready to start with the proposition. So it's back to you, sir.
All right. And so this evening, we have spent a great deal of time talking about many of the problems and the ills of our community, but I want to move us in a new direction tonight towards solutions. And in order to have solutions to problems, you have to understand what the problem is, how the problem came about, and then explore the options for resolving the issues as a solution to the problem. And so tonight, as we move into our ninth week before the November general elections, which can change life as we all know it in so many ways, it is important for me to start taking us down a road that will help us understand civic engagement, a road that will help us understand that as small as an individual might be, your vote, my vote are critical to the solutions that we have and the manner in which we live following the issues that we seek to address. So the first thing I want to do this evening is share with you that we have some 14 propositions on the ballot for November. And I want to tell you very briefly how a proposition comes about, what a proposition is, and how the proposition relates to you as a resident and a voter. Our system is set up so that we elect the people for local positions, school board, city council, board of supervisors, state assembly, on up the food chain to represent us. And we elect those people that come closest to embracing our thoughts and our concerns that we would like to see changed or implemented. So much of that change is made through policy, and we refer to it often as public policy. And public policy is developed in a manner in which most people don't understand and very few talk about. And yet policy is at the essence of all the dollars we spend, the taxes we pay, and the bills that come to us. So let me start off by helping you understand how policy is developed. There are two groups that are key to this process. First, I indicated before I mentioned the two groups that you have a right to vote. And it's a hard-fought right that we have. It was not intended for us to vote, us being Black people in particular. Women didn't get the vote until the suffrage movement came along. And all of these things were intended to keep control of government in the hands of a few people so that government would have very minimum influence, but the wealthy and the few would have great benefit. When the Constitution was being written, there was a series of documents published called the Federalist Papers. And the Federalist Papers, as I've spoken on before, represented a couple of schools of thought that were emerging as to how this country was going to be governed. Thomas Jefferson had a conservative approach to it, and Alexander Hamilton, who wrote several of those documents, had an approach that involved bringing people into the picture. And so here's what happens. I'm going to give an issue as an example. Let us say that, and I'd like to even use the Live Well Center, the Martin Luther King Library. I want to use those elements, those structures in our community. The new Oak Park Library that's being built. These entities are being developed and have been developed as a result of the people who live in the areas who are going to be served by them. Let me show you in terms of the Live Well Center. Before the Live Well Center was built, we had a number of satellite HHS offices, one on Market, and these were little dingy places, and we knew them as welfare offices, and people went who needed assistance. The system had been designed so that if you had to go get welfare, you intentionally had to wait forever to be registered, to see someone, to get a benefit. And it was almost like, if we frustrate you enough through the waiting, you'll go away. But the reality is that as a taxpayer, as a citizen, and as a voter, you have a right to the services that are there because they're guaranteed by the document that we honor. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Madison, in writing those words, understood that by virtue of being a human being in a free, non-tyrannical, non-enslaved society, you were supposed to be able to judge which way you go and what your life would be. Well, we know the first 400 years that didn't apply to us as Black people. But let us fast forward beyond the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. The one abolishing slavery, the other giving us the right and identifying people in terms of citizenship under the 14th Amendment due process clause. Citizenship says that if you were born in this country, you are a citizen of this country. Citizenship says that if you weren't born, you can become a citizen of this country by being naturalized. And so we have a process whereby people who come from other countries forfeit their allegiance to the countries they come from, and they swear allegiance to America after going through a process, and then they become citizens here. And as citizens, you are entitled to vote because the vote comes with your citizenship, you see. So now let's look at the issues that you get a chance to vote on. Why do we have propositions? Well, as you know, each state has elected assembly, a Senate, and a state assembly, with the exception of one state that doesn't have what they call a bicameral structure, it just has one house. But the important thing here is that since we have this structure, the people that we elect are supposed to go there and make decisions for us. And so we saw that happen in California when we decided to embrace the lottery. The people that we sent to the legislature, after much debate and struggle, they voted to approve the lottery, and the lottery became a source of income for the state, and it became a source of financing our schools in part because that was the trade-off that we made. So here's the key to policy. In order to move toward policy, there are three groups that are active outside of the legislative process. First of all, the people that we send to the legislature are given the opportunity to write bills. The bills that they write are supposed to represent the concerns that we gave to them. And those bills then are introduced and put into the system to move toward becoming law. So how do we get the concerns to them? We get the concerns to them by forming the first element, which is called interest groups. And so interest groups represent people who come together and they want to see a common thing take place, and it's not happening on the part of the people that they elected and sent to the legislature. And so the proposition format was set up there so that if you don't get what you want through the legislature, because the politics and the things that keep them from introducing or enacting a bill, you can then take a concern. You can get a certain number of signatures. And once you get those signatures and you submit them to the Secretary of State, and they verify that you have met the signatures required under our state laws to bring an item to be on the ballot as a proposition. Once that's done, okay, now we have something to work with. From the point at which we turn in the signatures, so many thousand, they are verified that the people who signed are registered voters, because if they're not registered voters, they have to be thrown out and they can't, their ballots can't be counted, okay? Once we get that part done, then the next thing that happens is now our interest group must become a pressure group. And a pressure group is usually manifested in the actions of lobbyists, people who go to elected officials, people who get them to introduce the things that you gave to them that you wanted to see become law. And San Diego has a very good example of that. Recently, downtown at 16th and Market, there is a filling station and a plot of land that a family bought some years ago. The family decided that they wanted to renovate the property, bring convenience outlets and things into it. But when they tried to go to the city to get permits, the city said, no, you can't do this because the codes have been changed over the years since you first opened your place. So you were allowed to operate grandfathered in because you existed before the code, but now that you want to bring something new, you got to go through the process. And so they went back and forth and everything they want got turned down. Eventually, they got wise and they hired a lobbyist, which happens, according to the article that was published, to have been a former city council member, who then went and lobbied the people in the city council, and they lobbied them and they lobbied the process. The next thing you know, now the matter is up for a vote. It's been approved. They haven't made any changes, but the change has come in the attitude of the people voting. That is one example. Another example is what happened here in San Diego about 25 years ago, when a bunch of African cab drivers decided that they wanted to have a taxi company. And they discovered that a number of people who had what they call medallions, which is a permit to operate a taxi, had died, that those things have been turned back to the city. And so these people organized and they came to the city and said, we would like to have those medallions so that we can own and operate our taxis just as the other people did. And the city looked at them, all of these Africans that want to go into business. At the same time, the existing cab drivers, which represented both an interest group and a pressure group, had made the decision that they didn't want any more competition. And so they forced the city to create a commission to study the matter and then to create a lottery. Meanwhile, these drivers hired a lobbyist, and the lobbyist went and lobbied for them. And so they did end up getting an opportunity to participate in a lottery, but they did not get the number of medallions that they would have had at first, because the existing cab drivers did not want any more competition and they were afraid of them going to the airport. And so what we see then is pressure groups evolving into interest groups evolving into pressure groups, and the pressure group now putting pressure on government and individuals to get the change that they want. Why am I telling us this, folks? Because 99% of us as people of color do not engage in this process. We will get up and go to a hearing and make a speech and think that because we poured our hearts out, changes that we want are supposed to come. And that's not what takes place. And so I wanted to start us down this process here, and I'm not going to talk the whole time because I wanted to have some interaction. It's a lot, and I want to give it in pieces. The bottom line is that once the signatures were acquired and the Secretary of State certified. Now those concerns that have been written up and presented become propositions or ballot initiatives, and they're put on the ballot. Why are they put on the ballot? Because the process allows that if the number of people required to pass a proposition or initiative vote for it, it will become law without having to go through the legislature, since the Assembly and the Senate did not act on it, and the people got what they wanted by bypassing the folks that they had put in office. And so we have many major examples of this in California's history, going back even before Howard Jarvis and the whole thing over property taxes and how that was to be handled. And so I'm sharing this because this election cycle, 9 weeks from now, we have 14 items that are going to be on the ballot, 14 propositions, in addition to voting for a governor, voting for members of Congress, voting for members of the state assembly, voting for members of the state senate, voting for school boards, voting for a city council in San Diego, and voting for board of supervisors and county positions. All these things are on the ballot at one time. But the propositions are unique because the other things are on the ballot as a result of positions that have already been established by the Constitution and state statute. The propositions represent the concerns of the people that didn't make it through the ballot process. And so, Dr. Thompson, I'm going to pause there. There might be some questions in terms of what I'm giving here, but this is important because to continue to come to people asking them to vote without understanding what their vote means, when we have so many people who feel that our vote doesn't count and participation is not necessary, is to do it injustice to the very people that we're talking to. Because if we understand the importance, if we understand what folks before us died for, were hung for, were shot for, were beat to death for, were asked to count jelly beans in a jar for, and to recite the Constitution in a foreign language, all of these obstacles, the poll taxes that said that if you didn't own property, you couldn't vote. All of these things were designed to keep us out. And now there is an effort to turn the clock back to beforehand. And that's because of what we're seeing with Project 2025 and the Trumps and the dismantling of things and the trying to outlaw voting. And I'm going to get to Prop 39 in particular. So, Dr. Thompson, I don't know if we have a question or a comment, but and we don't, but I think that this is so important that I want to move, Dr. Thompson, using our time in a proactive way going forward, giving advice where there's doubt, answering questions, and step by step helping people get to where we need to be. You know, there was all this discussion about how we needed to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, but it didn't allow for the fact that most of us didn't have any boots.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I want to show us that if we don't have boots, we can still walk. We don't have to wait looking for bootstraps to pull on, because we can walk barefooted. Many of us did that for a very long time. And so that's going to help make a tremendous difference. So I want to pause if you have a thought or comment, because I don't want to overwhelm us.
Well, I don't think that you're overwhelming us. I think that this is a good, like I always say, classes in session. We always start off with one of the things that you have been doing for consistently ever since I've known you, and that is registering people to vote. So I think that that is the number one thing that we have to do is after you get all this information, you still must register to vote. And so if you say, what can I do right now immediately if you're not registered to vote, or if you're not, your registration is not current, let's get it current. Let's make sure that you're getting your ballots, and let's get out the vote. And now you're going to have the knowledge to be able to vote with wisdom and be able to vote, basically not waiting for somebody to spoon feed you what you need to, where you're voting, but literally you will be able to look at it and make your own decisions based on the information you receive.
Well, I really do thank you for that. And we noticed that our own Secretary of State, Dr. Shirley Weber, has come under attack by the Trump administration. Many of you who saw last week's paper showed that we carried a front page story where they were demanding that she give them voter information. And she said, no, she's not going to do it. And let me tell you what happened. We put that story on front page. We also ran it on the internet. In 48 hours, we had over 15,000 views in terms of people in this community and in the state and wherever else they were watching and following us, looking at this and understanding the attack has come to California. Now, the attack has come to us in more than one way. Donald Trump wants this voter act so that he can control who votes. And they're talking about voter ID and that there are illegal people voting. And while there's always going to be one or two, we have a history of really doing a thorough job of checking registration. And of course, the Republicans have always been concerned because in California, you can register to vote when you renew your driver's license.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a strong feeling that a lot of people who are not citizens are voting. And citizenship is a requirement for the right to vote. And what's so significant about the attack on Dr. Weber is that even when she first went to the assembly, she was one of the people who authored and lobbied and got passed the kind of election voter inclusion laws that allow people who had served their time to vote. And you can now vote if you're in a state facility. You just can't vote if you're in a federal facility. You can vote if you're homeless. You can vote under all kinds of circumstances. And so what we've done at the Voice of Viewpoint, I have secured a number of blank voter registration forms, and one can stop by the office and pick them up. If you want to, we can help you fill it out while you're there in terms of getting them in. Once you put it in the mail, you can track your ballot and your registration in terms of what's going on. All of this is just so important right now, folks. And all of this is so critical. And so one of the other things I wanted to point out here is that of the 14 items that are on the ballot for initiatives or propositions that are on the ballot for this November, 8 of them have been endorsed by the California Democratic Party, and 6 of them they have been campaigning against vigorously. Okay. And so when I make reference to the 8, I think it's so important to talk about what is involved here. The 8 propositions, and you're going to get these in the mail from the California State Legislative Office. They're going to send out a booklet, as they always do, that gives the pros and cons for each proposition in the language of them so that you can study them on your own. But you can also go to the Secretary of State website and go to ballot measures and pull it up and read them and do background. So now the propositions that have been endorsed by the Democratic Party in California are propositions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 37, 38, and 40. And so you would say to me, well, that doesn't mean anything to me, Dr. Warren, because you just gave me some numbers, but you didn't tell me much about it. In the days ahead, I'm going to tell you about all of them in some detail. So when you get ready to vote, you're going to be well informed. But there were 6 propositions that the Democratic Party was against. Now, I'm not advocating the Democrats. Yes, I am. I'm advocating the Democrats over the Republicans because right now the Republican Party is not doing its constitutional duty. It's not voting as it should be. It's not challenging things that are presented. Trump has the Republican Party in the House in his pocket. He's got the Democrats in his pocket. He's got the Senate in his pocket. And the actions and the people that are being put up for office to be voted on, like Blanche, for Attorney General, people with no qualifications, the people being put up for things like the Director of Intelligence, all of these people are supposed to be vetted and have some skills. And the committee in the Senate, and this is called the advise and consent element of our government, is just rubber stamping whatever the president sends. And when the Democrats raise questions about credentials, then the Republicans just ignore that and operate from the standpoint we got votes. Now, we had a situation with Blanche where there were two Republican senators who were holding up their votes in the Senate Judiciary Committee. And they were holding their votes because they wanted the president to withdraw and to kill the weaponization fund that he wanted to establish to give benefits to the people who attacked the Capitol on January 6th. And these two senators made it clear that if the president pulled that legislation, they would vote for an incompetent, unqualified person who sat before the committee and stated that he was the president's attorney before he even stated that he was seeking to become attorney general. And the president has promised to keep him in that position acting, but there is a limitation on how long he can be there. Okay. So the propositions that the Democrats are against, and you will see why when I get into further discussion, but I'm going to give you these numbers. Proposition 39, Proposition 41, 42, 43, 44, 45. Now, what's significant about these propositions? Proposition 39 is very important because Proposition 39 establishes additional voter identification and citizenship verification requirements. All right. Now, you say, so what's the big deal? Remember, Trump wants everybody to have a ID card. And the premise is that all the people who are voting, many of them are illegals, and that's why they're voting. That's not the deal. Do you understand that the senior voters in this country are the most consistent people who do vote, number one, and that Black senior voters, many of whom they're still living, they marched with Dr. King in 1963 to get the Voting Rights Act. I was there with them when they came by car, by walking. Some came by buckboard with the mule bringing them, dressed in their Sunday go-to-meeting clothes. And it took 2 years from that date for Lyndon Johnson to sign the Voting Rights Act. And that's how important this whole thing has become, the right to vote. And so here we are now in a situation where identification, why is that important? Many people are born at home, and the older people are born in places where they didn't hand out birth certificates. I was born at my grandmother's house in North Carolina. And it just so happens that I did get a birth certificate, but there are many people that didn't. One of the concerns we have with the voter ID stuff is that at the federal level, they want it to be so that you've got to have a document to verify getting identification, like real ID. So you say, well, that's not hard. Well, if you don't have a birth certificate, as far as they're concerned, you're not a citizen. Well, why is this important? It hits women especially hard because if your maiden name was Jones and you have married, I had a lady come in the other day, last month, matter of fact, to The Voice, and she was changing her name because we do name changes. And the name that she was adding, since she had remarried, was different from her name on her other documents. And so she's the kind of person, if she showed up with identification that had her new married name on it, but didn't document the change, then she wouldn't be able to vote. And so the whole intent is to frustrate the number of people who want to vote so that if they don't vote, knowing that the smaller group, being conservative, mostly Republican, will vote because they are on an agenda and they see it working in terms of dismantling, moving rights, going against DEI, affirmative action. So they are motivated. And if they can frustrate the masses who have very limited staying power historically, then they can regain and maintain the control that they want. So that's why this is important. Now, what does it mean for California? In California, Caldemayo, who is in the assembly and comes from San Diego, a conservative Republican, right winger. Caldemayo is one of the authors of Prop 39. And Prop 39 is deceptive because some of us will see it saying additional voter identification and citizenship verification. And they will point to migrants and say, see, if you don't do this, these people going to be over here voting and they're going to take your place. Well, that's the kind of scare tactics, especially for whites in a society where they are becoming marginalized because the birth rates are down and the numbers of people of color are up in terms of acquiring citizenship. That becomes a clear and present danger. Kind of heard those terms before, right? Clear and present danger. And so what do? They set up a situation where one-time state and local government, and this is supposed to cost tens of millions of dollars to implement the whole program here, they would have to come up with a couple of things. Voters would have to present government issue identification at the polls or the last four digits of a government issued identification number when voting by mail. Well, if you can't verify your birth, if you don't have a birth certificate because you're 80 or 90 years old and you've been voting all of this time, you're not going to be permitted to vote. And just so if you can't vote, well, there goes Social Security. Because it's the older people who understand the value and they've been keeping Social Security the way it is. So if we can disqualify them, we can get younger people to ignore it and say, look, you don't need this. You well and healthy. You don't need to change. And let's give them all an independent plan. That was always a Republican thrust. Give you the money for an independent plan. And then they are the people who operate the independent plan. And then when your money is gone because you made a bad decision, as opposed to the mandatory structure we now have, you lose. Okay. And so these are some of the things that I wanted to start bringing to you. I've learned that people can't handle a whole lot at one time, but we're going to have a lot of people holding town hall meetings. And I want to remind you that a town hall meeting is different from a forum. A town hall meeting invites people to come in from the community to be heard, not to be talked at. And most of the things that take place here as town hall meetings represent bringing people together to be talked at by a panel of folks talking at them and maybe being allowed to write down a question. Isn't that interesting? As opposed to being able to express yourself, which is the true nature of a town hall meeting. But of course, a lot of people in California have never been east of the Mississippi, so they don't have any idea of how this works in the villages and hamlets and hamlets in the Northeast where people have been doing this for 100 years. Dr. Thompson.
So one of the things that I would be very curious about is that most of the things that we're seeing are forums versus actually town hall meetings. And so moving forward, how many forums do you think are going to how many town halls do you think that is going to take place to get us prepared for this election?
Well, I know that the Voice and Viewpoint is planning to hold at least one town hall meeting in both October and November, and the latter part of September and October. Mm-hmm. Okay, and the latter part of September, at one point, we will also have another Business, Grits, and Politics, which will be a morning meeting where we will have discussion. Our town hall meetings at this point are going to take place at the Voice and Viewpoint offices, mm-hmm. Okay? And they're intentionally, I'm thinking of not putting it on Zoom because it comes a time where we have to make a sacrifice in terms of personal involvement. And if we don't take the initiative to get out and get involved, then we take for granted. We can sit at home and just hit the remote and cut it off and go back to the movie or something. And then it's too late when they're at our door coming for us. And ICE has been coming for people who are citizens. Mm-hmm. So there's no question about everybody being safe, mm-hmm. at this point. And so we're going to be talking more about the meetings. We're going to be asking that if you have questions in terms of the things I'm discussing, politics, town hall, whatever, share the questions with us so that we can answer your concerns. One of the greatest losses we have in San Diego, as far as I'm concerned, is the absence of unity between San Diego's Black community and San Diego's African communities. And to the opposition, uh, we all are Black. We just speak with an accent. But because we don't come together, we miss a tremendous opportunity to move from being a interest group, back to that term, to a pressure group, where now we harness our votes and our power in terms of our numbers, and we bring about the changes that we want to see. Let us look at an example of that. Right now, because of the city budget, 13 bathrooms along the beach are closed. So people have been out there in this hot weather through the past weekend, having to walk miles. Elderly folks can't go to the bathroom. And why? They got signs saying the bathrooms are closed because of budget restrictions. Isn't that interesting? Well, if my bathroom is closed because of budget restrictions, help me understand, how is it that on University Avenue and all these other streets on Euclid, we got people tearing up the street, removing one of the traffic lanes that we have to put these little islands in there with the pretty little blocks, to put these circles like in University or downstream view and all these other areas where they are changing the pattern, to take a part of it, like on 47th Street, and use one lane for parking, and we're doing that in all these different places. How is it that we have enough money to do that, but we can't keep 13 bathrooms open? Well, most people don't realize that the bathrooms are perhaps in a different budget than what's being done with the streets. But at the end of the day, the city council that's voting, that made that decision and implemented that recommendation from the mayor, these are people that we send to office. They don't go to the beach and use the restrooms. But what about all the people that are out there? Well, why is it that the bathrooms and the libraries and the swimming pools and the parks and recs have to be the places that suffer when we have a budget crisis and we stay in panic mode, and they throw us little tokens like some renter's protection piece that's coming out to limit what landlords can do, when you ought to be putting restrictions through rent control on landlords that will help bring the homeless rate down, as opposed to throwing more money at it as landlords raise it and they take the difference in money.
Well, one of the questions that was asked is, then where do they suggest people use the restroom while at the beach?
They haven't made any suggestion where they go. And as you see the interviews with people, they got to get in their car, go home, or drive down further to another point where restrooms are open, which is ridiculous, because if you get to the beach and you get a parking space, if you move, you lose. So then what do you do? And then if people start going to the bathroom in public, because some of them can't hold it, now you're going to get ticket for indecent exposure and the whole bit. Okay, but you see the people going to the beach, for the most part, if you did a sample survey, how many of them actually vote? How many of them actually watch the budget discussions when this was the issue? Do you remember when the state was trying to raise them, put extreme fees on using our parks, our state parks? Okay, and people rose up about that. Okay, because the parks were created in trusts, just like the national parks, like Yosemite and places, to be used by people, not to turn around and to use it as a means for fleecing people. We rose up against the parking fees at Balboa, didn't we? But that change isn't going to take place until January. So there's still things happening. But meanwhile, we go through an election and we go through letting people slide. We go through having a mayor that could perhaps do a lot more than he's doing and is not getting done. Okay. And we are complaining, but we're not going the next step to see what do we do to correct what we're complaining about.
One of the things, Dr. Warren, that I wanted to ask, because you talked about the lowering the housing need for the homeless. Is there any statistics out there currently that says how many people are homeless based on economics and how many people are just homeless for, not economics, but just choosing to be homeless? Is there any type of demographics on that piece?
Well, I'm so glad. That is a very good question, Dr. Thompson. And last Saturday, Baypack San Diego's community enhancement meeting with Sandac or whoever paid for it, uh, they had a presentation on the strategic plan, and the deputy chief of staff for the mayor was there reading a script about the plan. And someone raised a question about uh, a homeless situation in San Diego. And this person went on to say that the people who were homeless in San Diego were predominantly drug addicts and people with mental problems. That is not true. That is a misrepresentation. What we now know, and they just completed 3 months ago, I believe, the annual homeless survey. All right. So we have over 16,000 homeless people in San Diego. But what we found in the survey is that the number of seniors is on the rise in terms of homelessness. And so that gives real concern because many of these people have health issues that put them at risk in terms of death, in addition to being on the streets. Now, our homeless situation is not as bad as Los Angeles.
Mhm.
Los Angeles has approximately 80,000 people that are homeless all over the place. Homelessness, I want you to remember, is a gift of Republican administrations. It was Reagan who started this whole idea of eliminating the residential facilities that were taking care of people who had mental issues and putting folks to the street. And that situation has grown. Here in San Diego, uh, we have rents that went up during the pandemic. We had to do a moratorium on evictions just to keep people from being put out because landlords didn't care about all of that. And the landlords here, if we really stopped and took a look at it, a lot of our judges are landlords. And I've sat in landlord tenant court and watched judges who own property rule against tenants. If you also look here on Euclid and Imperial, we used to have the Legal Aid Society, which was there to help many of our people. That's gone. That's totally gone. And so as things vanish that were there before, we are accepting the disappearance without demanding change.
Well, we have a statement by Miss Francine Maxwell, who says people are pushed into unsheltered, and regional task force has a ton of money, and people need to follow the money. And it says that 10,000 single resident occupancy destroyed, never returned on our seniors on a fixed income. So.
Well, Ms. Maxwell is exactly right when she talks about the money that's there, and I'm glad, Ms. Maxwell, you raised this issue because most people don't understand that the money for homelessness goes to the county and not to the city. It goes to the county, and the city and the county are supposedly working on homelessness under what is called an intergovernmental agreement. And the intergovernmental agreement is required because the city of San Diego is what they call a charter city. That means it's sovereign, and the county cannot tell the city of San Diego what to do. And the county of San Diego is a charter county, which means the city can't tell the county what to do. But cities like Chula Vista, National City, Oceanside, or El Cajon, as far as I recall, they are not charter cities. And so therefore they come under county control to a large part, or let's just skip El Cajon and go to Spring Valley. The unincorporated areas are under the control of the county. And so these things make a big difference in terms of where services are. That's why in Lemon Grove, for instance, the sheriff's department is the contract police services, because Lemon Grove does not have the resources or the status to have its own police force. And so you're right, Ms. Maxwell, about the dollars that are there. There's a whole bunch of studies that have been done. We know in the past 3 years we had this major study about homelessness with an emphasis on Black homelessness and how many Black people were homeless and how they were misunderstood, misrepresented, and the whole bit in terms of receiving help and assistance. And so these are things that, again, I promised in going forward that I would not go on yesterday. But remember, I started this discussion talking about interest groups and pressure groups.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, the homeless population will never be a pressure group, but it can be an interest group when people go and ask them for their opinion, but they don't have the resources. They are so busy in day-to-day survival, they will never rise to use their full potential in terms of what they could be as an interest group coming together, voting. You don't hear homeless people talking about voting, and yet they have a right to vote, and their votes have a right to be counted.
So here's a question that's coming from Ms. Milner. It says, are there established limitations on how many belongings the homeless can have while on the street? Or is it just that they subjectively can't have too much before the city comes in and hauls it away? Also, this is taking in consideration they just can't take over the sidewalk. So basically, it seems like sometimes when they have too many possessions, the city will just come and just haul things away.
Well, it's not quite that way, Ms. Milner, and that's a very good question. Let me explain how that works, okay? First of all, the government never moves in the direction of telling people how much of anything they can have. The problem is, and if you look very closely, in the homeless population, the people who have the carts, many times they have stuff that spilled over above and beyond the carts. You've seen some of them have a bicycle with a cart attached to the back of it, and they're able to keep their stuff together. The problem occurs when they park it and they set up these encampments on the sidewalk. And when the city comes with the police department and the sanitation department, then the things that are on the sidewalk, they give them first notice, a chance to move. Most of the times, these people can't move all the stuff. They got a tent there, they done set up a house, and the truck is there, and the crew is there, and then they start throwing stuff away. And that's how people lose their possessions, because many of the people that are homeless, and I don't know if you knew this, they have storage units. And they have their real possessions in storage. They have P.O. boxes. They get checks once a month from a variety of sources. Many of them have money. I've dealt with that over the years downtown. And so everybody who looks like they're bad off isn't necessarily bad off, but they can't walk around looking like they're well off either, or they get to be victimized. And so these are the issues. And for the record, Ms. Milner, we used to spend more time and concern with the homeless than we do now. We used to really be concerned. We used to have people back in the days of Tayati and others who, they had encampments up at Euclid and Imperial. Remember where they would camp out to raise shoes and clothes and all that. And churches like Bethel had sleeping quarters for people that overnight they would take them off the street, and they had members of the church volunteer to supervise. All those things have gone away largely through attrition, through the people who did those functions dying, moving on, health issues, new leadership, new direction. And so when you hear that expression that there's really nothing new under the sun, is a very true expression. It's just that some things have been forgotten until they're resurrected.
Well, one of the things about it is that very interesting statement about the difference between an interest group and a pressure group. And we need to evolve from being just an interest group into a pressure group. That is where when they see you coming, they already know the pressure is on, and that it's not going to stop until either we turn that coal into some diamond, or they just give up and just let us have what we want. So, Dr. Warren, how can we build these pressure groups? I know that we've been talking for the longest about combining with our African and African American population, but how do we literally build these pressure groups so that we can be in a better position moving forward?
Well, that's a very important question, Dr. Thompson, and it's done in a couple of ways. In some instances, pressure groups evolve because of people's common concern. For instance, the whole movement to kick certain books out of our libraries can bring together people who support the libraries and start looking at how do we protect the libraries, okay? All of our libraries have friends of libraries as an example. Those people come together at budget time because each time we have a budget crisis, they want to cut library first, and they have not even made up for the cuts from the year before. So those things are important. So the interest groups are the result of people coming together saying, okay, if you have this concern that I have, join me for a meeting on Tuesday night at a Voice and Viewpoint or at St. Stephen's or at the Malcolm X Library in the community room or Live Well. Come out and let us know that you care about this issue. And so we come together and we talk about it and we develop an action plan in terms of how do we address it? Who do we need to go to? First, we need to understand which issues go to the city council, which issues go to the board of supervisors, which issues go to the state legislature, where the issues go. Mm-hmm. And that's the first part of it. Once we decide where they go, then we need to sit down and structure how we're going to make the changes with the issue. I think I have a moment to give an example of something. Many years ago, when I was in office in Washington, D.C., a member of the Board of Education, Capitol Hill was a part of my district, which was the equivalent of having La Jolla and Logan Heights. And so I had two competing interests. And in the Capitol Hill area, because birth rates were down, or whites had moved back in, people had sold their homes, and we had a whole new element. We had all these schools that we needed to close. At the same time, some of the new young white residents were just beginning to have children. And so you would find the women showing up at a community meeting if they were 3, 4, 6 months pregnant, because they want to start getting the school ready for Mary Beth when she comes along, okay? And so what I did, knowing that I needed to close some buildings, I brought people together at our neighborhood house, and I broke them up into a couple of committees. And we set a timetable where every week for 2 years, I met with these people and we went through each of our buildings and what we wanted for the children that were there and the ones that were coming. And as new people came, we put them into beginner rooms, and the meetings never went longer than 2 hours. And as they evolved from the background so that we didn't have to start over every week, we went forward. At the end of this period, I was able to bring a list of schools to be closed to the board 2 weeks before my next election. And opponents felt that because I was going to be closing schools before an election, that it was going to work against me. But the people from those meetings are the ones that got up and recommended the closures that I wanted to make because they had been involved in a process that they understood. And most of us do not have the long-term patience to develop those processes. I started trying to replicate that when I first came here. And I ran into tremendous resistance because people say, oh, well, he's just trying to build a political platform. But I already knew from experience what worked for people. One of the biggest contributors to developing community entities was a group which we now know the name of the Mott Foundation. We've heard about Mott's applesauce and all those kind of things. They're not doing it anymore, but they got involved in such a way that they helped us make use of our school buildings after school, and they put funds in. And so we met and we planned what we would do. So today in DC, many of the schools buildings that were school have been transformed into residential centers for seniors. Mm-hmm. And this is what we have to do here in California. We have to start having a sense of long-range planning that everything we want cannot take place overnight. And we have to be committed to a process that also will include some inconvenience for each and every one of us.
Mhm.
But we've got to have the commitment because others are counting on us becoming reckless, restless, and impatient and moving away from the process.
Well, Dr. Warren, that is very, very true. And the reality is that this is the time and this is the season that we must go ahead and move forward. And we have the young people, we have the more seasoned people here that can make a big difference. Now it's time for us to get together, no longer talking about it. Let's take the gloves off and let's literally begin to build. I think that one of the biggest things is that we're showing unity when we support the information pieces that was happening with Miss Nash's organization, where several people came together to say, let's put some information out. Now, we can't just be single focus. There's going to be a lot of things that are going to come up before the election that comes. Biscuits, grits, and politics, and the forums that you're going to be holding at the San Diego Voice and Viewpoint. We want to make sure that once we put it out, we want to be like other organizations and other people in our city, and that is when they do things in their community, they're standing room only. And if we're hungry for this to become a pressure group, we need to make sure that we're up there, we're present, and that they're standing room only on all the things that we're working on together.
Well, there are two things I want to say, Dr. Thompson. Number one, we have a lot of young people. I'm excited that they can be a big help. And I salute you, and I hope that you will take the time to be informed and to get involved. That's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say is, if what I've said has been of any help to you and interest, then I would appreciate hearing from you, because I plan over the next 9 weeks to do this on an accelerated basis, to have evening meetings to the extent that I can, to bring people together. This will not happen for those of you who are in organizations that are looking to get funded in order to do something in the community. This is not that kind of party. And if you're waiting to get a grant or a fund from somebody to get involved with your own interests, then you're going to miss the boat. We're not looking to get funded. The Voice and Viewpoint has always spent more money than it's gotten from its commitment to the community. And when we look at the voter information that comes out, we get a couple of minuscule ads from the Register of Voters, but we put thousands of in-kind contribution in terms of pages in the paper to tell you where the voting boxes are, the locations, drop boxes, operation, candidates, a list to go in the voting. All of these things require time and money. And so I would like very much, if tonight has been of any help to you, it would be helpful to me to hear from you, because I am not interested in this being just another exercise. This is not a John Warren moment that I need. I have spent over 65 years of my life doing most of what I'm talking to you about on two coasts, from east to west and in between. And so I want to see us get involved and forget the differences. We can only make it work if we come together. And thank you so much for listening. Dr. Thompson, thank you for helping to make this venue available.
And Dr. Warren, before we leave out of here tonight, the topic of your editorial this week.
I did not do an editorial this week because I have so many powerful commentaries about voter participation that I did not want to take the space from those. And I encourage you to read the paper, especially the commentary page. There's a powerful piece in there of a lady who's, I think, is 103, and she talks about the Pettus Bridge and how she was there on Bloody Sunday, and how before she dies, she wants to cross that bridge one more time. And so those kind of stories to me, because she was there with John Lewis and Dr. King, those kind of stories to me were more important in the space than me doing an editorial this week.
Well, there you have it. The Voice and Viewpoint is hitting the press hitting tomorrow, and I believe the online version might already be out.
It'll be out tomorrow.
All right. And so we just want to say thank you so much for tapping in. This is From the Desk of the Editor with Dr. John Warren. Y'all be blessed. Until next week.